Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there's genuine resilience in a history that most of us really don't know anything about, and quite frankly, if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with, once more, as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more, in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. Subscribe. Please subscribe. It means the world to us. Please hit that subscribe button. Give us the old 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available everywhere. Well, pretty much anyway. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, please don't hesitate to check us out on the social media. We're on the Facebook, we're on the Twitter, we're on the Instagram, we're on the TikTok, we're on the Letterboxd, and I even think we're on the Tumblr for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because, you know, we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it. We love it even more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please, pay us a visit. On this episode, we have an important one. We have a really, really important one. For those of you who don't know, there has been a show playing on the Crave streaming service up here in Canada called Little Bird, which is about the Sixties Scoop and what happened to sort of to our Indigenous population up here with children being stolen and adopted, and what happened at residential schools and all that. But there is a companion documentary of it which is going to be available this coming June 30th on Crave and APTN, called Coming Home, from director Erica Daniels, and it gives a lot of context to not just what's going on in the series, but it makes us understand the impact of the 60s Scoop, how our Indigenous populations have been resilient and have had to sort of navigate their own sovereignty. And we see this not only in the stories that they're telling, but through stories from filmmakers and people involved on the show as well. And it really does allow for us to see the horrible policies that were created and put in place to separate Indigenous children from their heritage, and the systems that continue to do that even to this day. It's tragic, but I mean, it's an important piece of cinema. It's from creator Jennifer Podemsky, and like I said, it is directed by Erica Daniels. If you've been watching the show Little Bird, or if you haven't, like, watch Little Bird and then watch this documentary, it's really, really vital. But we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with Erica Daniels to talk about the documentary and sort of doing it concurrently with the show and so many of the issues that come up around it. But like I said, Coming Home is going to be available on June 30th on Crave and APTN. And check out Little Bird, which is finishing up this week as well, which is also on Crave, and I believe APTN. I'm not 100% sure on that, but definitely on Crave. But first, enjoy our talk with Erica Daniels about Coming Home, because it's a darn good one, and quite frankly, it's a vital one. So please give it a listen. Well, I mean, obviously, just first off, I mean, congratulations on the film. It's a hell of a piece of work, and I mean, it's so important just to, I mean, just that it exists, quite frankly. But you know, I guess my first question for you is, because I love that the film is tied into the making of the show. Was it always the impetus to sort of make this film surrounded by the show, or were you just kind of doing behind the scenes stuff and then something developed out of that?
Yeah, I think initially the idea was to capture behind the scenes and then hopefully gather some community testimonials. And we caught so much behind the scenes, but once we started talking to the community members of Broken Head and Sioux Valley, we seen then and there that the story was going to be bigger than what we initially thought it was going to be. which was really important. Instead of it being a focus on like the making of, it became a story of resilience and how these communities and the members who have went through the 60s Scoop, like how it impacted them and how they overcame, and just showcasing their resilience. That was something that was so important, and making sure that we were honoring these stories, and as well as providing that history and that backstory of what happened during this time and why it happened. Because I think a lot of people in this country are still, not aware of what happened throughout the 60s Scoop. I think there's a lot of education around residential schools, and it's good to see that people are starting to learn and understand that dark history, but just realizing that there is more, and how it also connects to what continues to happen today. So that's really, really what the focus became. And I think it was an opportunity to educate those, everyone, but also people who might be watching Little Bird and have questions afterwards. Like, this doc is a way for people to really learn and understand.
I can imagine Jennifer and Almaya, they were very sort of, would be very sort of supportive of something like this, but I can imagine logistically it could get a little complicated, because I mean, definitely on one end, you don't want to get in the way of the shoot, but at the same time, you're still very much involved in the shoot. Like, how did you manage to sort of thread the needle between sort of keeping to your vision for the vision for the documentary, but also sort of staying out of the way of the production?
Yeah, well, I mean, on set, we were, getting the permissions and stuff. I know that was a big challenge, but being able, like, we were able to get everything we needed in place, to be able to document the actors and the crew, and luckily, like, all the producers shared the same vision for both Little Bird and for Coming Home. So it was really nice, like, to have that support all around. So we were really supported to be on set. People were aware, and so they really made space for us, which was really nice, because we weren't, just some outsiders that were coming in. They included us as a part of their family, the Little Bird family, which really helped in making sure that we were able to capture what we needed for our documentary too. So, and then in the aspect of telling the story itself, and sort of kind of making sure that Coming Home has its own voice and its own life. One of the things that I did as the director, and it's just something that felt right for me, was I actually didn't see the Little Bird show. Even when they provided me the link months in advance, I made the decision not to watch it because we were still in post-production and I was still constructing the story. And I wanted to make sure that it like, for me, like, being a spiritual person, I allow spirit and to kind of guide me as a storyteller. And so I didn't want to be influenced by, the story of Little Bird, because it was just being on set, like, I was learning about that story of Little Bird and Esther, and like I was almost like just on a journey of this, like, learning about this woman, this fictional character story, as well as, connecting with real life stories. And so I wanted to make sure that what I was constructing was its own authentic piece, that, wasn't being influenced in any sort of way by this fictional story. So yeah, that's kind of how I worked to make it, what it is.
And I'll let you in on a secret. I did the exact same thing, because they gave me everything, but I mean, I didn't want to watch this until I watched your film, just so I could have sort of that degree of perspective.
Mm.
And I mean, for me, as just sort of the middle class white guy in the middle of the city, I mean, I knew obviously of the history, but I mean, I didn't know it had a catchphrase. I didn't know that it had been decades plural.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk me through, I guess, just diving into the research to really sort of tell not just your subject stories and the individual stories, but tell the overarching story as sort of as accurately and best as you possibly could?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I took that responsibility really seriously, because even for myself, and I think for a lot of Indigenous people, and obviously non-Indigenous people, it's something that we're still learning, and we're still trying to, put the pieces together, because like for me, I wasn't taught it in school. I don't remember learning about the 60 scoop at all. Like I remember briefly learning about residential schools, but I didn't know that, children were being adopted out and sold across North America and into, across seas. And so this whole journey for me even was more of a learning experience, because as I got older, I did start hearing the stories from survivors of the 60 scoop, and briefly learning about it, but not to this extent. And so being able to, work with producers like one of my producers, Michelle, who is, a great researcher, and having her guidance and just working with me to construct the story, but also find, like talk about like what happened throughout history that led us to where we are today. And just, like people who in the 80s who stood up to stop this, and those people that really made change within the system. And so learning about that, it was difficult for me, I'll have to admit, like just watching old interviews between, leaders and politicians or news anchors, and just the way that they would speak to our people or speak about Indigenous people was really hard to listen to. It was a challenge to tell the story, because it was just connecting with these stories on a personal level, and then just thinking about how far we've come, but how much farther we have to go. But for me, that was really important, was working with the right people and having the right consultants, such as Raven Sinclair, who is a 60 scoop survivor herself, but also, a professor in social work and somebody who has studied the 60 scoop. She's, our main voice throughout the film, who gives us that history about what happened, why it happened, and, different events throughout history that, that people came forward to make this, to stop these adoptions. So yeah, it was a huge thing for me. And I really hope that we did our community justice and told it in the best way possible, because it is something that people need to be aware of and they need to learn more about.
No, and I mean, I agree with you on that 100%. And I mean, at least from my perspective on sort of the entertainment side of things, we've had stories about the residential schools, and we've had these stories before, done in various different forms. But with the influx of Indigenous storytellers and getting more and more respect and getting more and more space to tell these stories, at least from my perspective, I have found these stories have gone from being about sort of shifting from the horrors of what happened to about the horrors of what happened to a person or to individuals. How important do you feel is sort of the individual aspect of really allowing these stories to resonate? Because I mean, again, when we hear historically about something that happened or a tragedy or this, that, or the other, we never really, it doesn't have a connection. But if we connect it to a person, it impacts so much more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like for all the people that are brave enough to share a story, it's healing for them as well, right? So that's so important for us to be able to have the space to share our stories. But I think, like you said, for people to be able to have that connection and hear like a firsthand lived experience of what survivors had gone through is going to impact our audience in a different way of just talking about it like a broad subject, because a lot of people don't realize like even the subjects in our film, they're young people, they're not old. This isn't a historical event, because these people are still young and are just becoming comfortable with sharing their story. And I think that that's huge for them to be able to have a platform to finally be heard, because that's going to do so much for their own healing, but also for other survivors who might not be comfortable in sharing their own story, and being able to see somebody who's also sharing their story. And I hope that gives them strength to be able to go through their own healing or share their story when they get the opportunity. But yeah, it's really important to be able to have these platforms. And these firsthand experiences and provide this platform for them to be able to share their experience.
Now, I'm curious for you as a director, how was it working and talking to your subjects? Because I mean, on one end, I mean, I can imagine that you had many willing participants willing to sort of share their story, but at the same time, these are very difficult stories. And I mean, I can imagine for you as the filmmaker, there may have been moments where you had to, I don't want to say push, but definitely sort of, I guess, try to coax if there wasn't, if someone was maybe sort of holding back or kind of being reticent about telling their story. Like, how did you manage sort of, I would imagine, sort of the personal side of wanting to be a caring, compassionate human being and making sure someone's comfortable with telling their story versus, okay, I have to get this story for the film, or I'm going to have to put this aside and go on somewhere else?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, like I've been telling Indigenous stories for the past 12 years, a lot of traumatic stories, but for me, my focus is always the resilience, like what the hope and looking to the future is something that I'm very, passionate about, is sharing that healing that we're doing collectively as a community. But I've never been one to push. I build relationships and bonds with each person that I have the privilege of interviewing, and I think that they can feel that authenticity from me. I'm never trying to pry. I think it's so important when we're in this position to make your subject feel as comfortable as possible and sharing whatever it is they want, because I'm just there to provide an opportunity for them to heal, when whatever way that is. I'm not looking to try to get the best story. That's never my intention. It's always just, what are you willing to share with us? What are you willing to share with the community, with the world, that can help educate or help you heal or help our community heal? I think that's my main thing, and people understand that that's where I come from when I tell stories, is to educate and to provide a space of healing. And so I think that's something that's super important. Like, and I think me being Indigenous, that's something too. Like, I've heard it from my producers and other people I've worked with. It's just saying, like, they could see through the film how people were so comfortable in sharing their stories with me. And that was a reflection of the way that I was with them and how I was able to work with them. Because again, like I said, it's never about making them uncomfortable. It's making them as comfortable as possible and just being there to hear their stories, just to hear what they need to say and, be supportive in that way.
Well, that's a credit to you as well, because I mean, it takes a story like this from being occasionally didactic and just sort of about sort of the history and turns it into the reality of people's lives, and it allows for that audience connection so much more. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, because obviously, because you were intertwined with the show, it does feel like not just the show, but even sort of making this documentary had the opportunity to sort of, I mean, I'm looking for the right word here, but it almost had a sense of catharsis. And it was almost cathartic in many ways, if that makes any sense. And I mean, that definitely felt like it was coming across on the screen. Would you say that was accurate?
Yeah. And I think, like I said, like the story evolved. Like, again, I work with spirit when I'm telling these stories. It whatever is supposed to come will come. And it was interesting how everything sort of fell into place and how it all connected, especially when we look at the stories of the community Broken Head, and we talk about the tragedy that had happened on the highway, and every single person that we talked to was connected in that tragedy. And that resulted, in the beginning of the Sixties Scoop within that community. And that's something we didn't know. We didn't know that going in to the community. And it's sort of just like we uncovered that, and people were willing to share about it. And, people who were firsthand like affected by that event. And so again, I just feel like everything that was supposed to come out and everything that was supposed to be shared, it all happened for a purpose.
No, I mean, I'm curious because obviously by the time this airs and by the time the documentary airs, the series will have, hit its conclusion. I know we got a couple of weeks left to go, but I'm curious, how do you feel audiences will be informed by the show as they come into your documentary. Because I mean, again, it's funny, you and I, were just talking about this a few minutes ago. I watched the documentary first before I even wanted to take a look at the show. You didn't want to look at the show as you were working on the documentary, but audiences will have it flipped. How do you think that's going to
Yeah.
inform people going into coming to see your film?
Yeah, and I think like I haven't watched the full series yet of Little Bird. I'm actually watching as the community watches. That was something that I wanted to do just to be able to experience it as community experienced it. So I'm, waiting for episode 3 for this week. And one thing that I think I really hope that it'll do is for a lot of people, they might still have questions because, it is like they obviously can't get into all the details of what happened and why it happened. So it's a way for people to, watch this fictional story, but it really is a story like that many people share, because it's lived experience from a lot of different people. But for them to watch this, and in whatever questions they might have, this film will be able to answer it for them and give them a real lived experience coming from each survivor. So I think that's the difference there, is it's a way for people to learn more and have those answers that they may have had, like everything sort of put together for them, to continue the conversation and to also be able to educate other people within their communities or wherever they are, and hopefully be able to share it wide so that more people can learn about it.
For sure. And I mean, in all forms of art, and I mean, especially with these projects, continuing the conversation is just so important. And I mean, I think everyone, like with your film and with the show, I mean, I think it's making a real good step in that direction. And I mean, I think you've done a hell of a piece of work with this film. But I mean, honestly, thank you again so much for the time, and congrats on the work.
Thank you, Miigwech. I appreciate it.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.